Jon Anik here in Las Vegas, joined by Joe Silva and Sean Shelby. This is the watch list for UFC 200, which means that potentially the greatest card in UFC history is now approaching on July 9th. 3 championship fights. Is this on paper, Joe, the greatest fight card in UFC history?
It certainly has the potential to be. I mean, I love this card from the very first prelim all the way through. It should be an amazing night of fights.
Not necessarily a man for superlatives, but certainly the main card on paper is as good a lineup as I've ever seen. What exactly went into the making of UFC 200? Were there any true hard and fast goals prior to drawing up the first outline of the fight card?
And basically our marching orders were make it the best card possible. Yeah. And you know, you feel a lot of pressure that you got to see who is available and what makes sense, and we're very fortunate that just we were able to put together a tremendous lineup.
Weren't we in the boardroom arguing about, you know, what's going to be main card, what's going to be prelim, going over, and it was tough to pick.
And you had every fighter on the roster wanting to be on that card. Yeah. You know, if it's the first prelim of the night, it is an honor to be on UFC 200.
Yeah, the first prelim of the night, those fighters potentially could headline a show on FS1. I mean, that's the type of depth we are talking about. So the main event, of course, will be Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier. What can DC take away from Jon Jones' last fight against Ovince St. Preux, if anything, moving into this one?
I think at least in his mind, he's kicking himself that he wasn't in that fight.
Yeah.
He really believes that Jon Jones would have lost to him. For Jon Jones, it may have worked out to be a good thing. You know, a lot of fighters, if you're in boxing, after a layoff, you're going to take a tune-up match. That doesn't happen often in UFC, but for Jon Jones, it probably was good for him to shake some of that rust off, get in there with a tough guy, and be ready, because DC is somebody, if you're going to beat him, you need to be 100% on top of your game, because he's as tough as they come. He's an excellent wrestler. He's got knockout power. You better be at your best if you're fighting Daniel Cormier.
So it sounds like you think Jon Jones could be buoyed by the fact that he got those 25 minutes under his belt as he gets ready to rematch DC. Also on this fight card, Jose Aldo, Frankie Edgar. I can't stop smiling when I talk about this rematch. Very close fight, at least according to Las Vegas and the odds makers here. Your expectations for the UFC interim featherweight title fight?
It was an incredibly close fight the first time out.
Yeah.
You know, Aldo got the win, but I think, you know, Frankie's grown as a fighter. I think in facing Aldo the first time, he's probably going to make adjustments, and I expect it to be an even closer fight this time.
The other title fight, yes, there are 3 of them. Miesha Tate, her first title defense, will come against Amanda Nunes. Certainly a qualified contender here when you look at the resume. But in your mind, why did you believe that Amanda Nunes was a good test for Miesha in this spot at UFC 200?
It's pretty easy. I mean, you know, Amanda has the best win streak in the division, and she is very dangerous. She's arguably the best stand-up fighter in the division. She can take anybody out within 1 round.
There's the tap! Amanda Nunes has done it!
This card is just incredible. Now we're getting to Cain Velasquez several minutes into this. Of course, a lot has changed in this heavyweight division since the Velasquez-Verdum rematch failed to materialize. So here at UFC 200, Cain Velasquez, Travis Browne. I'd imagine the winner here sets themselves up for another massive fight, if not a title fight here, before we close the book on 2016.
For sure, and the heavyweight division is incredibly interesting right now. It's going to be interesting to see this stylistic matchup between very tall, rangy Travis Browne going against a shorter, stockier, but powerful wrestler, hard hitter, Cain Velasquez, and where are they both at? I think they both want to have not just a victory, but an impressive victory, because they're trying to say, I need another shot at that title.
And what an opportunity for Travis Browne getting the UFC 200 spotlight. A guy who I thought by this point of his UFC career would have already realized the UFC title shot. So we'll see what he can do against Cain here in a few weeks.
You know, that's what Cain wants to get back his title, but Browne's still looking for that first shot at it. And he's got to get past the former champ if he's going to get there.
And if social media is any indication, Travis Browne certainly pulling out all the stops in advance of the biggest fight of his career. Now, on the watch list for UFC 199, we talked about this bantamweight division and the year of the bantamweight. And certainly when you look at the top 10, it is a murderer's row. Huge fight here at 200. TJ Dillashaw, Rafael Assunção, rematch of their fight from 2013, which Assunção won by split decision. Are you considering this a true #1 contender fight, title eliminator type fight, or not necessarily?
Definitely is an eliminator fight, so to speak, and their first fight was very controversial, and that's why we're running this back, you know. He had him finish in that first round, and Assunção got the decision. We're going to see if TJ can put some finality into it, or, you know, Sun Tzu goes and beats the former champion and it's his turn for a shot.
Sounds though like a finish on either side would be pretty useful, at least in terms of their championship aspirations. All right, as we continue to look at UFC 200 here on the watch list, Sage Northcutt on the fight card, dealing with some adversity now for the first time in his very young career. Your expectations for Northcutt in a big spot against Enrique Marin?
It's hard to be in UFC, period, as deep as the talent pool is, to be in his weight class, which is the deepest weight class in the sport. But to have all of those expectations thrust upon you at such a young age, so early in your career, and having so many people just actively rooting for your downfall.
Right.
You know, but maybe, you know, he had a lot going against him in that last fight, and took on an incredibly tough guy, late notice, in the higher weight class, but maybe losing that took some of the pressure off of him. So maybe now he can have a little bit of pressure off of him and just, you know, progress at a better pace for him. And Enrique will be a good test for him, his first fight back from that. But I think stylistically, that fight's gonna be a lot of fun.
I think you are right. Some of the pressure is certainly off. I remember, you know, 19, 20 years old, I think I was trying to figure out if I could skip class again and get away with it. This guy's fighting on a world stage on Big Fox in front of millions of people. Another big spot for Sage Northcutt coming up on July 9th. Diego Sanchez versus Joe Lauzon. So 43 UFC fights between them. I guess kind of hard to believe that you haven't made this fight before. It shall be done July 9th.
I have made this fight before.
Oh, okay.
It just did not happen, as quite often happens with fights I make. But no, I've wanted to see this fight for a very long time. I think both guys have wanted to see this fight for a long time. Very, very good chance this fight is fight of the night.
And Sean, that is not all. Two of the most exciting bantamweights in the world, Kat Zingano, Juliana Pena, both coming off of long layoffs. They will end them against each other July 9th.
Kat Zingano, she can really lay claim to. She's bested not only the champion, but the title challenger.
It's all over! That's it. Kat Zingano wins her UFC return!
And then you have, you know, Juliana Pena, who's on the rise ever since The Ultimate Fighter. She's looked better and better every time out. I mean, just the two of them are just absolute rough and tough fighters. You know, it should just be an all-out dogfight in there on that night.
And the fans seem to really gravitate towards both of these fighters. And I think in terms of the ceiling for Zingano and Pena, you think both of them, you know, potential #1 contender, potential champion types, yes?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you know, you listen, you know, Pena is yet to lose in the octagon, and, you know, she's on a steady rise. She's getting better every fight. And then, again, you have Kat Zingano, you know, she's got an argument for the championship belt, you know, with a win here.
All right, also at UFC 200, big spot here for the former UFC welterweight champion Johnny Hendricks. He will try to kickstart another title run against Kelvin Gastelum. What kind of challenge do you think Kelvin Gastelum presents here to the former champ?
I really like this fight. This is two powerful, stocky, hard-hitting wrestlers.
Oh, just like that! That's the big left hand again! Knockout win for Johnny Hendricks!
Hendricks, I think he desperately wants to get back to getting his belt back. And Kelvin Gastelum, I do have to say, just a pleasure to matchmake for that guy, because he's the kind of guy you call him up with somebody who's very tough, and he'll be like, can I get somebody tougher? You know, that's just, that kid is a competitor, super hard-nosed. I really like this matchup. I see this fight being very explosive. The wrestling may cancel each other out, and you may end up with a slugfest.
Amazing fight, and a matchup that, as I said, easily could headline a show on FS1. You're going to see this fight and then 4 or 5 thereafter, July 9th at UFC 200. All right, finally, we only got a couple more minutes, but Takanori Gomi, Jim Miller, we got to get to them a little bit. Seems like another matchup here that you made, not unlike Lauzon and Sanchez, with fight fans in mind.
Well, these two fighters I have so much respect for these guys. Yeah. Jim Miller is, I've always said, he was, when you have this thing about I'll fight anybody, anywhere, anytime, that's something people have said forever, and I can just tell you, a lot of people say that, it's not true. But he was always a guy that I would point to that it is for him. Never has he ever blinked at an opponent. Yeah. Has taken so many short notice fights, fought the very toughest in the world, in the toughest division in the world, and he's always in exciting fights, very well-rounded, super veteran, and just taking on a legend from Japan in Takanori Gomi, a guy who's had so many amazing battles, and you know, I felt these two, for the great wars they've given us over the years in such a tough division, they earned their spot to be on UFC 200.
Well, about as remarkable a lineup as has ever been put together in UFC history at UFC 200. Just in closing, you know, here we are getting closer to UFC 200. How gratifying is it when you have sort of a vision for a show of this magnitude and largely the lineup plays out the way you would like to see it play out?
It rarely does, right? Usually we're on plan C or plan D for that matter, and it is gratifying, it is nice, and now it's up to the fighters.
And I know for you, you're not necessarily a big pat on the back type of guy, but to see UFC 200 on paper and everybody staying healthy as we inch closer, got to be pretty satisfying for you given how long you've been at this.
Well, you know, it's going to be history. You know, I've been very fortunate to have done this from the original UFCs to now to do UFC 100, which was such an amazing milestone, and then to make it to 200 now. And the sport, every time you think it's like, this is amazing, but this is the peak, this is where it is, it just keeps getting bigger, it just keeps getting better. So yeah, it's an honor to be a part of such a monumentous event.
These guys are putting together 500 or 600 fights a year, so just want to say on behalf of UFC fans around the world, thank you for your time today. Thank you for UFC 200. Thank you all for watching the watch list, and we'll be back for UFC 201. For Joe Silva and Sean Shelby, I'm Jon Anik. Thanks for watching. See you July 9th, UFC 200.